Hi, and I wanted to make a separate short video just to cover a few of the specific manifestations that I found that have occurred under previous tense transits between Saturn and Uranus. And so as I mentioned in my weekly preview and on my blog at lastunka.com, generally under Saturn and Uranus difficult transits, which would be conjunction when they basically have 0-degree separations, square 90 degrees apart, and 180 degrees when they're opposing each other. Typically those transits coincide with various sudden difficult events, maybe some accidents like an airplane crash or various industrial disasters, and typically things occur very rapidly, involve some structural damage. So if say there's a flood, first something breaks, like a dam breaks, and then you have a flood, not just that, there's a lot of precipitation or there's, say, a typhoon or something like that. And also, it typically things, for example, if there's a leak, things usually don't just leak and pollute water, for example, but things usually explode and, blow up, so to speak. And at the same time, of course, the square coincides with things like various riots, increased military kind of skirmishes, or even military activities, deployment of troops to deal with some issue, various like protests, riots, instability, unhappiness, about whatever the social conditions may be. And when there are other difficult transits happening at the same time, which, things usually don't occur in space, and I guess in space, but not in vacuum, or maybe in vacuum, but not alone, I should say. So this year, 2021, we'll have Mars joining Uranus and Saturn to form a T-square, and that would be especially felt at the end of June, early July of 2021. But with other difficult transits, such as, for example, we have right now is the retrograde Mercury squaring Neptune, which would lead to things like miscommunication, kind of unclear details. So maybe if there's, Mercury has to do with like navigation, tools that basically are required to maybe drive something somewhere or like lead a boat somewhere. With Mercury being retrograde and square to Neptune, this may basically not happen, like maybe an instrument may malfunction or communication may be unclear, and therefore things may just, accidentally lead to a problem, but on its own, maybe this won't have been so bad. But if multiple of transits kind of coincide at the same time, things, little problem suddenly becomes a big problem, basically. And so again, just a few examples from previous years when we also had Saturn and Uranus in difficult aspects, and those occur about, I'd say, 10, 11 or so approximately years, every 10, 11 or so years. So for example, back in 1988, on July 6th, there was this, really large, one of the deadliest offshore industry disasters. So Piper Alpha rig had exploded, and unfortunately it killed 167 people. And basically, there was a huge loss. Apparently, I'm just getting that from Wikipedia, 1.7 billion pounds of money, basically. That's the cost of the disaster. And I guess it's supposedly one of the costliest man-made disasters due to that. And that was occurring under fairly precise, within like just minutes apart, Saturn and Uranus conjunction, with some other things going on. Then literally within just a few days from that, so on July 3rd, also 1988, there was an event. There was Iran Air Flight 655, which again, I'm just getting all that from Wikipedia, scheduled passenger flight, and apparently it was shot by a guided missile cruiser by US Navy. Again, there's some dispute about why it happened, etc. For the purposes of just going through the examples, it's sort of irrelevant in the sense that it's just an example which I had seen before, again, with specifically Uranus and Saturn being in tense transit is that there is an airplane crash or something that is supposed to be flying, high or being at a high level crashes down. In this case, and something that is large, made of metal or rock, such as we had this Uttarakhand, avalanche or glacial burst that led to a lot of mixture of ice and rock going down really fast down the mountain. And at that time, I guess the ice melted and that burst the dam and that caused the flood. But first, something that's large, like a large structure, and something that perhaps either is flying or something that's at the top high level breaks down, and that causes some disaster, unfortunately. Let's see. Also, on May 4th, 1988, there was a chemical explosion in Herndon, Nevada, also under Saturn and Uranus conjunction. There's some other, again, transits kind of making it be kind of more significant than just the conjunction on their own. And that's another thing that I've noticed, again, with Uranus and Saturn, is that if there is a disaster, it usually is, again, sudden and usually accompanied by some explosion. And of course, already on the 14th of June 2021, when Saturn and Uranus squared each other exactly, we had this explosion at the Illinois chemical plant, and explosion also in some larger explosion, I guess, near some gas station in Novosibirsk. Again, large explosion that hurt over a dozen people, happened again on the same day. Also, let's see, so that explosion in Herndon, Nevada, I guess, was at the PepCon, and there was massive fire, explosions at the chemical power plant, and unfortunately, over two people were killed and over 300 were injured, so it was a fairly significant event. Then on June 28th of that same year, 88, there was some incident where chemicals were mixed improperly and some workers were killed. Then also, as I mentioned before, I forgot the year, 2010 or 2000, I'm not sure, but there was this really major fireworks disaster in Enschede and Netherlands, and that is considered to be the largest ever fireworks explosion, where again chemicals were not stored properly in some warehouse, and I guess the doors weren't closed to that warehouse, and basically things gotten worse, unfortunately, and suddenly things exploded. It was a lot of damage. And this year, of course, things will be unfortunately the most intense in terms of this T-square between Mars, Uranus, and Saturn around July 1st through, say, 6th. And of course, in the US, 4th is the Independence Day, where typically people light up fireworks, etc. And so I would definitely advise extra caution around anything that's, chemicals that can explode, fireworks. Obviously, caution is always advised, but I would say this year particularly, one may want to, take extra precautions, or perhaps not even, stay away from those kind of activities altogether. Let's see, then we had also Saturn square Uranus in 75, 76. And so some of the examples, I guess, there was another air crash, which happened to add the gear air, and on August 3rd, 75, which was the largest, deadliest, I guess, crash in Morocco. And there was also a dam failure in China at the same time, which was this 1975 Banqiao dam failure. And there was obviously an extreme large disaster, which happened also within just a few days there at the same time. Let's see, and not just, like I said, large objects or large structures can get damaged, but also individuals with high stature, people who are at the top, or who's being, say, getting sick or demoted affects many other people because, again, they have so much power, or they're revered by other people, or somehow their ability to do something affects many other people, is also something that may come up, meaning that people who are in power or just famous, and again, their actions affect many other people, something may happen to them as well, in the sense that people who are at the top, they literally may experience accidents, or they may just experience, some fallouts where, their leadership status changes. So one example, also in 75, on August 8th, there was a car accident where, I guess, basically one of the singers of Led Zeppelin planned, I forgot already his name, sorry about that. But basically what happened, and I read about that, but I think his name is Robert, but let me look. But basically what happened is that they were on vacation, and his family and the singer, Robert Plant, and his whole family, they unfortunately had a car accident, and so there was a scheduled tour for Led Zeppelin for like months, sold out tickets, etc. And the tour had to be canceled, and then it took like a couple years for him to recover. And unfortunately, then subsequently, not because of this crash, but like a couple years, his son also died. So basically, I guess for a person, if they're susceptible to some of these kind of negative transits, they may experience, I guess, multiple issues, unfortunately. But basically, I guess the point of the story is that even though it was one individual and just maybe his family that was actually injured in this crash, the effect was such that many people were affected, people who obviously couldn't attend the concerts, but also members of his band. They couldn't really quite produce music as they were expecting. And then, of course, the company that invested into obviously having all these concerts, producing music, etc., they couldn't, I guess, recoup their money. Of course, money is not essential here, but rather what I'm saying is that because of the stature of a person, this obviously had this wave, of an effect. And Saturn square Uranus may see kind of famous individuals also being impacted. Again, not everybody, but those who may have certain, natal chart that is sensitive to the particular transit. But it may be, not because this individual is so important on their own, but rather because their actions, or if they can't perform certain actions, may affect others, just because, again, they were involved in some large project. And let's see, so other things would come. Of course, there were all kinds of earthquakes, heat waves, floods, volcanoes, etc. in 2010, and apparently it was like named one of the deadliest years in more than a generation, again, per Wikipedia, obviously the most reliable source of all the news. But basically, indeed, there were a lot of events like that, and again, that's also the time where there was transits where Jupiter was conjunct Uranus, and those two were in a position, Mars and Saturn conjunction. And there was also, of course, difficult transits from Pluto at the same time. So long story short, 2010 also had difficult transits between Saturn and Uranus, and plus other things happening. And it was definitely a year full of various blizzards, floods, major earthquakes. And so that's another probability. Unfortunately, at the end of June, early July of 2021, there may be a really significant earthquake, something along the lines of like Spitak earthquake in Armenia, for example. And again, it's not as bad perhaps, but it's going to be something, I think, significant. And other potential events that may occur is, let's see, market crashes, flash crashes where things suddenly go down and they do recover, but unfortunately it could be, again, significant drop in a day. Earthquakes, other examples include this 1976, July 28th earthquake in China, which was in Tangshan, China. super significant, like almost around 8 on the Richter scale, flattened the Tangshan industrial city, and basically estimated 242,000 people have died, so really significant. Again, I don't think that it will be quite as bad this summer specifically, but it just gives you an idea that some really powerful shakeup may occur, basically. Let's see. There was also a significant earthquake in 75 on November 29th in Hawaii, which was also quite significant, 7.2 on the Richter scale. And again, large damage due to the size of it. Then we had another flight, October 6, 76. Again, that's the 75, 76 years where we had a Cuban flight on October 6 of 76 that went down due to the terrorist bomb attack, and unfortunately 73 people on board were killed. And that particular crash killed every member of the Cuban national fencing team, which is, again, something that I just mentioned earlier with Robert Plant of Led Zeppelin example, where you have prominent individuals that something happens to, and again, of course, it's bad that things happen to them. I'm sure it's a lot of suffering to their families, but because they're specifically important in some way, things affect even more people in this wave kind of like effect, because again, there are people who are, who know about these people, who are dissipating their appearance, or people who are investing in maybe projects that these important people associated with, etc. Then, of course, March, April of 65 were quite tense years as well, where we had yet again Uranus and Saturn were in opposition, and so there are many other also bad transits. That was one of the worst, I guess, years, not just because of Uranus and Saturn opposition, but also because of these other additional transits I'm not going to get into. But basically, and of course, there were like civil rights movements, I guess Vietnam War, and there was also this Valparaiso earthquake, also known as La Liga earthquake in Chile, which again, high magnitude, like around 7.5 on Richter scale, and so like 1 billion damages. So things that are high in magnitude involve either famous people or things that involve explosions. Like there was this explosion in La Salle in March 1st, 65. There was basically, again, unfortunate situation when several dozen people were dead and injured. And there was also a tornado outbreak, for example, on April 11, 65, which is Palm Sunday tornado in the US, and that was supposedly second largest recorded in history as of 2016. So we're talking about things a little bit more significant and either magnitude, or because they involve important people, or because, again, there is this, either they're costly in terms of the cleanup, or unfortunately they're a large death toll. There were also floods, of course, in Mississippi and Denver area in 65, which again were kind of occurred at the higher level, I guess, than, or at the floods were reached a higher level in a long time, and many of those records still stand to this day. Let's see. There were some other issues. Let's see. In 53, but I didn't record what it was, so something bad happened there too. I see. Yeah, there was a mining accident in Menzegraben in 53, and let's see, basically again there was a large pocket of carbon dioxide in a salt mine in East Germany, and maybe I should say Menzegraben, but on July 7, 1953, and as I mentioned before, multiple times I've seen, and again larger, smaller scale accidents under the Saturn and Uranus transit, where it's not just a leak like a gas and oil leak or chemicals spill, for example, but rather they follow an explosion and fire. Things are like loud and big and impactful. So I didn't keep digging further down sort of in the history, but you get sort of an idea. I just wanted to bring some specific examples. Again, under some of those Saturn-Uranus difficult transits, there were other things happening at the same time. So obviously things like maybe presence of Jupiter, some difficult transits from Jupiter makes things larger. Pluto obviously makes things, not obviously, but Pluto typically brings like this more of a deadly kind of a impact, meaning there's maybe a greater death toll, or things occur kind of deeper underground. And when things are either conjunct, for example, Mars conjunct with the nodes, or Saturn, Uranus, Pluto make transits to the nodes, which will actually be occurring next spring in March, April of next year, is when you really have these events which then are called the great, something, the great flood, the great whatever explosion, etc. Luckily, we don't have it this year, but Mars certainly is capable of starting fires, exploding things, and just kind of making things occur suddenly and unpredictably. And so basically, long story short, mid-June to mid-July of 2021, we will have this precise transit of Uranus and Saturn, and late June to early July, Mars will form T-square with those two planets, and that's the time where I would definitely try to take it easy and avoid any risky and dangerous activities. And basically, if one, for some reason, works in those areas, just kind of be extra careful and make sure that you're prepared, and expect that maybe there's increased, kind of a work sort of volume in those areas where things need to be, attended to. So that's it from me, and hope you enjoyed this little extra bonus short video. Until next time, guys, bye.